stream. So it means we will be live in just a couple of seconds. So yes, I think we should be live now. So hello and welcome everyone to another Facebook Live. My name is Yana Ratif and I will be your host today. We have an exceptionally special guest joining us, Dr. Nasha Winters, and she will be chatting to us about the metabolic approach to cancer. However, before we jump into that, I would just like to remind our audience members to have a look at our Patreon page. We've recently launched our Patreon page and we're slowly but surely building on our amazing content there. There'll be in-depth articles, research on LCHF diet, behind-the-scenes videos with our experts, live Q&A sessions, and educational resources. Our Patreon page also serves as a fundraising effort for the Noakes Foundation. So please have a look at that. And now, without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Nasha Winters. So, Dr. Nasha Winters is an integrative oncology specialist and the author of The Metabolic Approach to Cancer and the Mistletoe and the Emerging Future of Integrative Oncology, host of Metabolic Matters podcast and the executive director of the non-profit organization, the Metabolic Terrain Institute of Health. An internally recognized authority in integrative cancer care and a sought-after public speaker, she champions a comprehensive approach to cancer treatment, combining standard of care with vetted metabolic and complementary therapies for optimal outcomes. She is a trusted consultant for medical professionals and researchers worldwide, offering expertise in patient evaluation and treatment strategies. She is also one of the Nutrition Network lecturers specifically on the cancer module. So if you're interested in having a look at that, I'll ask our media team just to pop the link in the chat box and you can check it out. And Dr. Nasha is also revolutionizing cancer care with her vision for a pioneering residential integrative oncology hospital and research institute. She recently took a giant step towards realizing that vision with the opening of a new non-profit metabolic research lab in Phoenix, Arizona, focusing on personalized cancer treatments and early detection tools. She's also enhancing cancer treatment education through the Terrain Advocate Program and the Metabolic Approach to Cancer Practitioner Master Course, training practitioners and advocates globally. To support patients, she is raising funds for financial aid and ensuring access to innovative treatments. And Dr. Nasha's for-profit ventures MetaVida and MTO are producing groundbreaking supplements and an AI-powered health data platform, respectively targeting metabolic dysfunction and personalizing therapies. Her multifaceted efforts are on the cusp of transforming cancer care and metabolic health worldwide. Dr. Nasha, you are truly an incredible woman. You have done so much, and I really cannot wait to hear more about it.
Thank you.
Just quickly to our audience members, if you are new and this is the first time you are joining one of our lives, please in the comment section say hi, let us know where you are from. I'm tuning in from Cape Town, and Nasha, you want to let everyone know where you're tuning in from?
I'm in a phone booth at a IT hub in Ibiza, Spain. So yes, normally not my home. Mexico is usually home, but this is my conference season all over Europe. And I have a couple days to catch my breath before the second tier. So I found a great space to hang out with you all today that had good internet. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Truly, it's really an honor to have you. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Nasha, please pop them in the comment section and we will do our best to get them to them during today's live. So, Dr. Nasha, I am just going to start with, just a basic question so everyone can get to know you a little bit better. And you have had an incredible journey in integrative oncology. Can you maybe share just a little bit about your personal and your professional journey and background and what led you to focus on metabolic approaches to cancer treatment?
Absolutely. Well, like many folks who are drawn to the field of oncology in general and integrative oncology in particular, it's from our own sort of pain to purpose, our own experience. And at the age of 19, after years and years of health issues that got kind of entangled into misdiagnoses, I was eventually diagnosed with end-stage ovarian cancer. And that set the trajectory of my life. I was pre-med and interested in medicine, but this definitely took me on a different path, whereas standard of care had nothing to offer me. I was too far gone. Even a single dose of chemotherapy would have taken my life at that time. The accidents that happened for me over the following 18 months are instrumental to getting me more curious to understand different approaches and additional approaches to what standard of care could offer, which is almost 33 years later. Here we are. I'm still learning for myself, and I'm still learning for the hundreds of thousands of patients I've had the honor to have a hand in their own healing journey. And so, with that, where the metabolic piece landed for me is very first and foremost, I had a bowel blockage, 100% bowel blockage, so I couldn't eat. And so we didn't know this back in 1991, but that was probably one of the things that saved my life, was deep dive into fasting, which is one of the most powerful metabolic paths we could possibly determine, and it's free, right? And mine was sort of an accidental journey that paid off, and others today, with the help of really good medical oversight, can be done very safely and effectively to enhance standard of care, to help push the carbohydrate restriction platform that I know the Nutrition Network is so passionate about, and so much more. So that was one of the big ahas. The other big ahas was in my early research for saving my own life. I stumbled across the work of Dr. Otto Warburg, who was a time in the 1920s started to learn that maybe cancer wasn't a genetic disease, but rather a metabolic mitochondrial disease. As such, showing that cancer cells use energy differently than normal cells. So that resonated with me much more than the genetic theory did, and that put me on a path of learning more and more there. In the 1980s, a woman by the name of Dr. Mina Bissell started doing research on maybe the tumor and the tumor cell and the tumor pathway was less of the area of where we should put our focus and more on the extracellular matrix and the tumor microenvironment, which also very much informed my own understanding for my own body and what I would later apply to my patients. And then luckily, way down the road, after many years in private practice focusing in cancer, Dr. Tom Seyfried brought this concept back to our attention and brought out the book Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, and started kind of the last, I think that was 2010 or 11, and really the last 10 to 15 years, it has just been an explosion in a field that we are now understanding and that we're now calling metabolic oncology. And I feel very excited about what I've seen in the last few years. More has changed in the last few years with regards to how we can approach cancer than I saw collectively the 25 to 30 years prior. So there's a sense of hope and a sense of things are maybe changing and expanding. So that's what brings us here today. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that truly inspirational story. And I think often what I hear, when we talk about not just cancer, but anyone who has had some type of chronic disease or something that was believed to be a chronic disease and that maybe turned out not to be, or autoimmune disorder. I mean, something that really stands out at the end of the day is people that really like in going out and trying to find the truth, it's seeking alternative, going out and trying things for themselves, doing their own research. And I feel that's such an important aspect of all of this. And that's why we're doing the live. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
So I want to kind of start at the beginning. We all, and even myself, we all understand, what's cancer, and, we understand it's some type of tumor or a growth. Right. What is it really? Like, why people get cancer? What exactly is it? And what happens in our bodies?
I love it. Well, first of all, I want your listeners to know that all of us have cancer all the time. All of us do. So there's no such thing as being cancer-free. There is such thing as keeping those cancer cells in check, right? And living in harmony or synergy or symbiotic relationship with them. And so that's one thing that sometimes blows people's minds, but is actually quite understood and respected in the industry. And yet we sort of put ourselves in the mindset of going to battle with something that is actually us. So I want to plant that seed first and foremost. What cancer isn't is a single cause and a single treatment. And even the American Cancer Society articulates that cancer is a collection of hundreds of diseases. As such, that should probably suggest to you and the listeners that there is no one path to why cancer expresses. There are many paths. And my job as an integrative metabolic oncology specialist is to help determine what that chronology or what that biology or even that biography was that led to the expression or the overexpression of a cancer ring. I use that word as a verb very specifically, why we'd have this cancering process. And so each person is different. Each person is unique. And therefore, their why of having cancer also needs to be approached uniquely as to what they're dealing with and how to change the trajectory with a variety of tools, be it from standard of care or quote unquote alternative care or a combination of the two. And so we're learning more and more that cancer isn't just a genetic disease, that in fact, less than 5% of all cancers could actually be classified as genetic. And even those genetics have room to be impacted or manipulated by our diet and our lifestyle. So there's also something about the concept of thinking this is a genetic disease, that it's just a Russian roulette game, that it's simply bad luck, that it's just we're doomed no matter what. That is such a hopeless mindset. And yet that's the entire mindset our industry is based on. Whereas a metabolic mitochondrial theory of cancer suggests an all different, more hopeful path and understanding to move the patient forward, which is to say, okay, I didn't know what I didn't know until I know. So it's not about a blame game. It's about a learning, an awareness, an educational process, an empowerment, and an accountability and personal responsibility in how you can impact the expression of your own cells to bring them back into balance or into synergy with the whole terrain, the whole ecosystem, which is you. Yeah.
Thank you. That's so interesting. And there's a few things that you now mentioned that kind of make me think of lots of different things. But you spoke about mitochondrial health.
Yeah.
And I watched your lectures on the Nutrition Network's platform on cancer. And there you said it so beautifully. You spoke about a terrain-centered approach. And if I try and quote you correctly, but you said we cannot heal from the same soil that made us sick. So
Yes.
so when we say that, what does that mean? What is
Sure.
a terrain-centered approach?
I love it. And so in my 30 plus years in this field, what I've learned are there's some major drivers that contribute to the health or the dis-ease of our internal ecosystem. And that includes things like our epigenetics. So the genes that have been passed down, perhaps generational, but the genes that we have the ability to change their expression by our day by day activities, right? So that's one component, that's one drop in the mitochondrial bucket. Another one is the very simplistic term, which you guys are so good at, which is what are you fueling those cells with? What are you feeding those cells? Are you metabolically healthy? Are you metabolically flexible? Are your mitochondria thriving in the environment in which you're feeding them, or are they diving in the environment? The third big one is environmental toxins. We now live in a cesspool. This planet is unfortunately highly polluted because of us. And it's no longer a matter of if you have toxicity, it's how bad is it and how does it interplay with your own physiology. And then we look at things like microbiome, which is probably the most hottest topic in research today, and its impact on how our body does keep our immune system functioning, does utilize our dietary input, does utilize our pharmacology input, et cetera, that our microbiome matters with regards to how we respond to treatments of any kind. The other one is our immune system. I mean, my goodness, our immune system is what regulates, is what is on the lookout for and deals with cells that have gone rogue. Okay. And that when the immune system isn't working well, that's when those cells can get the upper hand in the wrong direction. And then, of course, the other big drops in the bucket, inflammation, poor oxygenation, hormone imbalance, poor circadian rhythm and stress response, and mental emotional duress. These are things that definitely pull the levers to our genetic expression, to our cytokines, which are immune and inflammatory markers that you can turn on and off at will by what you feed into the bucket of your mitochondria. And so these 10 major drivers are things that need to be evaluated for each individual to see what, in fact, their personal priorities are. That it might be for somebody that hormones are the main driver, or emotional stressors are the main driver, or a life of just really bad dietary habits are the main driver, or they've worked in a job where they were exposed to high toxins or the main driver. The beauty is that we are able, with the tools we have today, from really good questionnaires, from really good lab tests to even functional lab testing, to our SNPs, our single nucleotide polymorphism testing, to even our blood and or tissue assays of the tumor itself, tells us exactly what we're dealing with in the context of that terrain, in the context of what's in that bucket. And then we know precisely what steps are required to change out what's in that bucket and to make that person more resilient to either the response to treatment or prevention of ever having the cancer cells go rogue to begin with.
I mean, it's really a very personalized approach to the treatment of cancer. And
Absolutely.
when you mentioned those 10 things, correct me if I'm wrong, but out of all the 10, I was listening, I was thinking, the majority of them, I feel like to some extent, as an individual, you can go and say, okay, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change this, if there are some aspects. But for me, the one that stands out is the toxins and the environmental toxins, because yes, you can, do what you can at home. But
right.
Unfortunately, even the water we drink nowadays, it's full of microplastics. It's like, how do you get away from that? I mean, we also, in the area I live, there's farms not too far from here, obviously spraying of pesticides. I mean, there's just so much going on. So I'm just curious to know, in general, what type of approaches in terms of kind of reducing toxins or clearing toxins from your system do you usually make use of in your practice?
Such a good question, and it can feel daunting. In fact, I recall when I was taking my environmental medicine coursework, which was the whole field of medicine, by the way. Most of us in the 60-some students that were in that class were ready to jump off a building by the end of it, because it felt so daunting, it felt so overwhelming, it felt so futile, it felt so hopeless. But what my teacher, the late Dr. Walter Crinion, and the late Dr. William Ray, the father of environmental medicine, suggested is that any step we take is helpful. Our body is incredibly grateful for whatever step we take. So we start with taking a personal audit of what we put in, on, and around us that we do have control over. So much to your point, what we have within our closest construct, our homes, our schools, our working space, you do have impact on. You can make different and better choices. The next step is that as patients and as clinicians, we must be more than those two things. We must also be advocates and activists. So when you learn something to do better, you need to teach to do better. And a lot of times people are going to resist you. As someone who's been giving and shouting this message for over 30 years and have dealt with thousands of naysayers, dozens, if not hundreds of haters, and a lot of people telling me everything I was saying was frankly bullshit, the data's there. And now everyone's like, oh, now there's a problem. I'm like, no, the problem's been here. We have to be willing to be courageous enough to speak up, to ask for change, to be part of the change, to be part of the solution, because frankly, no one is going to do it for us. So maybe you take control in your children's school. Maybe you jump into the park system where you live and start to push for stopping the spray of pesticides on where your children play. Right? Maybe you are bringing a recycling program and a refusal of having any plastics at the workspace. It takes someone to start it. No one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And so anything you do is helpful. And just even starting with the awareness that most women walk out the door to go to work every morning with over 60 chemicals on their body. That should probably be a wake-up call to start to even audit and assess the body care products, the cosmetics, the things you're putting on to create an illusion, of beauty that is a mask, and those masks are often quite toxic. We can do better. We can do so much better. And there's so many innovative companies and resources coming out that do it better. Support those businesses. Stop supporting those that contribute to the problem and start supporting those that contribute to the solution.
Wow, I love it. And I love just the practical ideas, because I was sitting thinking, oh, yes, I can do that. I can do that. I can go, I'm going to say, upset a few people, because let's be honest, it's going to be met with resistance, right? But
Always.
somebody, yeah, but you have to start at home, and then the playgrounds, the school. So thank you for that. That now kind of sparked some ideas in my mind.
Good, good.
I quickly want to hop over. I'm just going to hop over to Facebook, because I see we've got a few people here saying hi.
But
So
yay.
Glaucia Brooks saying hi, good morning from Brazil. Georgina is saying hi and good morning all the way from Spain. Then Oswald is saying hi, Jana and Nasha. Louise Benning is saying, can't wait to listen to this. Just finished your book after I listened to your amazing podcast with my friend Jackie Fletcher.
Yay.
And then Faranak is saying, hi, Jana and Dr. Nasha. So lovely to be here. Always great to learn from Dr. Nasha. And she's tuning in from Joburg. Oh, and then Louise is also saying she was born and raised in South Africa, but now living in Andover, UK. Love Ibiza and been there before. It was one of the best. Been there before, and it was one of the best holidays I've ever had.
Wow.
And then Maritza is also saying hi, and Oswald is saying, wow, a very nuanced approach. So thank you, everyone, for joining in.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I've noticed so many, I don't know, there's some people that saying, it's not that more people are getting cancer, it's just we are more aware of it. But I mean, for me personally, I believe I am definitely seeing more cases of cancer around me. I remember growing up as a child, like here and there, and like, far removed. I would hear someone suffered and had cancer, but now, I mean, I can literally probably, if I think back from my school days and university days, I can probably get more than 10 people that I personally known that has developed cancer over the years, and these are young people. The youngest person I know was in her early 20s developing breast cancer.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts on it. Why do you think that's happening?
For sure. And, it's interesting, just so your listeners know that this isn't just an impression of, oh, we're just doing a better job of diagnosing. That's such a fallacy. That's such an industry-driven ideology. It is, in fact, happening. 1 in 2 of us are expected to experience a cancer in our lifetime. That's not my statistic. That's the World Health Organization statistic. World cancer rates are expected to double globally by 2040. We've had multiple studies come out in the last few months alone, including the early part of this month of June 2024, of the concern and everyone saying, I wonder why, which, boy, howdy, we can go into that. Wonder why the fastest growing rate of cancer is actually now in the young. And this used to be a disease of the old, of the aged. And we understood that in the metabolic mitochondrial place. We understood that because we understood that over time our mitochondria age. So it made sense to us. But now that we have younger and younger people are trying to then say, well, that goes against the theory of mitochondria. I'm like, actually, it more enforces it, reinforces it, because we may be chronologically younger now getting these diagnoses, but we are biologically much older because of the damage I described to the bucket of our mitochondria. The babies coming into the world today have an average of 200 known toxins just in the cord blood itself. The nature of which the mother was incubated in her own mother's womb, and the eggs of her mother in her mother's womb. We are 3 generations down in every single woman, and we are getting sicker and sicker for every subsequent generation because of what we've done to the world around us. And so our planet is very sick, and our exposures are over the top, and our ability to deal with that, as well as our loss of rhythm, our circadian rhythm, our constant being plugged into technologies and screens and EMFs, things that the human race has never experienced before, the amount of toxins in our food supply, in our water supply, as you alluded to, never have we seen things like this before. It's incredible to me that people question why we're sicker than ever and younger than ever and why these rates are exploding. In fact, what brings me hope is that, well, if 1 in 2 of us are getting cancer, that also means that 1 in 2 of us aren't. And so what do we want to learn from that? What can we look at and what can we work to prevent or educate or empower along that? And our nonprofit and many others that we're linking arms are coming together to first ask the questions, do the research, because nobody wants to funnel funds into this type of research, because that would take away from the industries that are continuing to make us sicker. And we're interested in bringing different tools to the table to help for prevention as well as treatment and survivorship in patients going through this. Again, if I waited for these things to happen, I would be waiting my whole life. If I had waited for someone to do this for me 33 years ago, I'd be dead. We wouldn't be having these conversations. If we waited the average of 17 years it takes to get data from the bench to the bedside, meaning to make it accessible by you, the listener, if you're dealing with cancer, we'd all be dead. It takes people like ourselves who are interested, who are curious, and who are committed to changing this conversation. And I get pretty fired up, as you can probably tell, that it is astonishing of the rates we're seeing, even more so in the last few years, as we have other elements that have contributed to what is being coined as turbo cancers, which seemingly at first people thought was a conspiracy, but now we're understanding the mechanism of action of both an infection and an injection on the expression of a particular gene known as PIK3CA or oncogene, which is prevalent in over 70% of cancers, as well as a few other levers that this particular infection and injection and the receptors that it's impacting are changing the way our body is being able to handle things metabolically, being able to handle things circulatorily, if that's a word, I'm making it up now, is able to handle things hormonally, is able to handle things from the oncogenes themselves, so kind of on the genetic spectrum. So it's a different world we live in today, and one that's going to take each and every one of our own contributions to change it back. And as overwhelming as it can be, the miracles I get to see every day, despite the grim news, gives me hope. And the number of research and the number of clinicians and colleagues and researchers and patients and patient advocates coming together to join forces to change this narrative and shake it loose of the industries that don't seem to care until it affects them directly. We have to do it. We have to change it.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we're going to hop over to some of the questions
Great.
that we got. So the first question that I want to ask is from my friend Louise. And she's saying she's not asking for medical advice, just your opinion. So she's saying, why after a lumpectomy that has been successfully removed the tumor and then used tissue from the back to fill the hole. Now radiotherapy for 5 days at a double dose per day, then a 5-year period of taking a pill called letrozole 2.5 milligrams. What does the radiotherapy beams target if the cancer has been cut away, and what is the purpose of taking this tablet?
Well, first of all, that's a really great question, in that before you even make a decision to just jump into the algorithm of standard of care, which sounds like she or someone she cares for has gone into that, that's just standard of care. So it's like, we're going to remove it, we're going to radiate, we're going to do these things. But let me give you a different perspective. I have someone who comes to me, they have a lump, they want to do a biopsy, they want to do an ultrasound guided biopsy. We prepare them for the biopsy first to prevent seeding. Just an FYI, even a stage 0 or stage 1 cancer already has circulating tumor cells, already has stem cells in circulation. So even by the time you have a stage 0 and it's theoretically all contained, it isn't. We're learning that more and more. So that's the one place to start first by understanding what's going on in the terrain so you can enhance the quality of the terrain to keep whatever is in circulation intact, to keep it quiet, dormant, right? So we prepare the body for biopsy to prevent even more spillage and more issues in circulation. Then we take that tissue and we evaluate it for what's known as a proliferation score. In the United States, they call it a Ki-67 score. If that score is less than 20%, this is not a rapidly proliferating cancer process, which means that treatments like radiation and chemotherapy don't hold water because they only target rapid proliferating cancer cells. So that right there makes me question the validity of using a therapy like that. Not to say you don't do anything, you still need to do something, but maybe those aren't your first go-tos. The second thing is we have something called in other parts of the world mammoprint or Oncotype DX. So if it is an ER positive, an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer that's pretty localized, a stage 2B or less, we can actually run a score to show how much more of an overall survival or how much more of a progression-free survival could we bring to bear if we introduce things like radiation, if we introduce things like endocrine therapy, which are the hormone blocking therapies. So that's another place that we can look deeper before we determine, is that a fit for you? Notice the theme here of personalization and personalization precision. The next question is with insulin levels. If someone is going to do radiation, let's say you do have a high proliferation score, or you just feel called to this for whatever reason, you better bet your butt you're going to get your insulin levels down, because guess what? Your cancer cells are desensitized to the radiation when your insulin and glucose levels are high, period. So what that means is that the radiation basically doesn't do its job well. And if anything, it aggravates the system further and makes for more mutations and more difficult to kill cancers in the future. That's not a good idea for anybody at any time. So we want to really potentiate this. This is where using things like therapeutic ketosis, fasting states, bringing on exogenous hormones, sensitizing the cancer cell with things like oxygen and high dose melatonin can potentiate the radiation therapy while protecting the healthy cells. Doesn't that seem like a better idea than what we're being offered? And then she brought up letrozole. Now, letrozole is an aromatase inhibitor. And letrozole is only used in women who are postmenopausal, peri or postmenopausal. But it's also one of those drugs that if you have an ESR1 or 2 SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism, or an ESR1 or 2 target on your cancer cells, on your tumor, you are not a candidate for that drug. It basically shows that those drugs are ineffective for you. Same if you're a premenopausal woman and someone's recommending something like tamoxifen, a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modifier. We want to also look at SNPs like F5, which is a Leiden 5-factor genetic issue of how you make your coagulation pathways work. If you have CYP2D6, so an enzyme detox pathway of the liver, CYP2D6, if that is an issue, you do not metabolize that drug appropriately. So you only get the risk and not the benefit of these drugs if they're being wrongfully applied. So hopefully my comment back to this question is there are a lot of factors as to how and why you would choose any of these therapies. And just jumping right into the algorithm of standard of care is, first of all, to me, it's negligent, but it's also can be dangerous because it can also set the trend for cancers to recur, which happens more often than your oncology team will likely express. I know because I get to see these people on a regular basis who did all the things for a stage 1, and now I'm seeing them for stage 4. And when we do the retrofitting to what happened, it's because all along they were given the wrong treatments at the wrong time, at the wrong dose, at the wrong duration, the wrong combination for them. This could have had a much more thoughtful, precise, and personalized approach that would have woven together the best of what standard of care had to offer, if it was appropriate, with the best of what integrative therapies had to offer. So I hope that answers the question through an example.
Thank you so much, Nasha, and thank you for the question, Louise. And I mean, just personally, things like this and situations like this and the way you explain it, and when it comes to personalized medical healthcare in general, it often makes me feel on a personal level quite a bit like distrustful in doctors.
Yes.
And for me now, being a parent, especially when it comes to my children, like it's difficult for me to trust doctors when they have certain opinions about things we have to do and take this pill and use that medicine and this is wrong and do this and do that. And it's so frustrating. And it's not that I blame the doctors, because that is what they have been taught.
Right.
They've been taught to follow certain, standards of care. But I feel like there needs to be, and that's why people like you are here, like the Noakes Foundation Nutrition Network, all the Nutrition Network members, like that's why people like us are here and advocating for personalized care and to go like look beyond what is just, given and, put in front of you. And it
Yes.
ties in with go and do your own research, go and read up and go and find out. Um, I mean, I've been surprised with the information I found on, like, I'm not going to make names, but interesting social media platforms. I'm like, oh, I did not expect to learn something about, whatever here. And then when I go actually look up the
Yeah.
specific topic, I'm very interested how there is research done in that particular area, but just it's not in the mainstream healthcare. It's not being spoken about.
Yeah, if you don't know to even go look for it, you just don't know. Or you think it doesn't exist or that it's bogus or it's not relevant. And yet every single thing I just said to you is very backed in data and research.
Exactly.
It's not an opinion, right? Although I have 30 plus years of an opinion because of what I've seen clinically, tens of thousands of anecdotes, which are just as important in the research spectrum as RCTs. But my golly, everything I've said to you is really well articulated. And that means that standard of care can be improved upon. And what I just described is or should be standard of care, and it should be accessible by all to have access to that type of information and that type of precision and personalization. This is how we're going to change outcomes in healthcare in general and cancer care in particular.
Exactly. I mean, I also know of someone who's been told by her doctor that, when she was going through treatment and things, like, eat the chocolate, have the juice, do this, do that, because that is not why you got, that's not why you've gotten cancer in the first place. That's not going to make a difference. And I mean, for me, it's always so difficult. And it's not just with regards to cancer, but even, in the field of diabetes and metabolic health in general, when I hear people say certain things, and sometimes, I have to bite my tongue because it's not a space where I can say something, but it's an extremely frustrating situation when people kind of just accept what is being said and being told to them, which is also again not their fault. It's just showcasing the need for personalized healthcare. But yeah, anyway, on to the next question from Georgina, saying thank you for this interview, Dr. Nasha Winters. It's always an honor to listen to you. Considering the work we do at Eat Better South Africa and the Lokes Foundation in low-income communities in South Africa addressing insulin resistance, how can we effectively educate these communities about the connection between diet and cancer?
I love this question so much because a lot of people think that what I'm describing is only for people with means. I mean, first, I hope it was really evident, Georgina, that my journey started out, I came from extreme poverty. I'm the only person in my family to go to college. I lived in a TP or camped the first 4 years of my diagnosis just to be able to survive, to pay for things and figure things out for myself. I had to be completely resourceful and resilient on my own. I was uninsured. And so I want to assure you that this is accessible to everyone. And things like fasting are some of the most empowering ways. And we've co-evolved with that. And so starting to educate and bring back the wisdom of our ancestry, the wisdom of our culture, the wisdom of a tool that is free and accessible by all and helping people access things like that, bringing back the wisdom of global, like communal gardens and those types of things of learning how to get your hands in the soil and actually have impact on your food supplies and the community that brings together. Those are things that could be really empowering and reminding people of where they came from, of where we evolved from. There are so many amazing tools that are coming to be. We're seeing these communities pop up. The Latin communities are really bonding together to create resources for there. We've got India is like taking on this huge movement in metabolic health. We are looking for partners in Africa and South Africa who want to do the same and start to create these circles of metabolic health awareness, which I believe Nutrition Network and NOKES already does, but can take it even BANT. And a lot of these others have already been doing this forever. But in the cancer space, that doesn't quite exist because there's also a lot of stigma around cancer as something shameful, or even something as demonic possession, or something that you've somehow done wrong. We really want to help change that. And groups like A Fresh Chapter, my friend Terry Wingham, she's brought a lot of this education to Africa and South Africa in particular with her organization to help understand the sort of cultural and ancestral nuances of these conversations as well. But this is something that, again, let's lean into each other. Let's find out how together to change these conversations, because I can't pretend to know how best to reach someone in a certain community, but I've certainly worked in communities. I've worked on in the Dene population, the Navajo Nation in the United States, the Ute, Southern Ute, Mountain Ute environments, Apache environments, where these are our indigenous peoples, where we've come in and learned from them to know how we can best reach their communities. We have advocates from those communities who've come to our training program that are now coming back into their own communities and bringing this wisdom forward that connects with their culture and community in a way that somebody like me stepping in couldn't ever do. And so again, this is that place where we resource together, lean together, and figure this out together.
Yes. I mean, I definitely feel like this is a conversation we should continue to have.
I love it.
Set up a meeting, chat about it.
I love it.
Because if I can a little share about, I mean, the lady that looks after my kids during the day, and so a couple of years ago, I think her mom was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer, and she passed away like a few weeks after that diagnosis. And then recently, another family member of hers was again, before she was even diagnosed, they already suspected because the symptoms and everything looked quite similar. And by the end, when she was diagnosed, I think she passed away 2 weeks after her diagnosis. And I think what here by us, a big struggle with the public healthcare system is kind of getting the help you need sooner, or getting to a doctor sooner, because the process of getting there, and sometimes just the conditions to be able to get to a clinic, to get to a doctor. So the same with diabetes that we've seen in some of our previous the barrier to proper healthcare is so incredibly difficult. And that's what our the organization like Eat Better South Africa is trying to do, is through education, empower those communities, so like giving them the power back. And we've seen incredible results, how people would like reverse their type 2 diabetes and bring down the HbA1c. And I love like the practical tips that you like in terms of fasting and incorporating that. So I would really love for us to have this conversation, continue this conversation, see how we can collaborate and maybe bring that into our program, because it's so needed.
Thank you. So it's something that we're also why we're a nonprofit, and what we're trying to create is accessibility globally. And this is something where this hospital we're building in Arizona is just the beginning. We want these types of clinics, these outposts globally, and we want to be able to make this accessible by everybody, no matter their circumstances. And so this is the only way we're going to change this, is if we don't go at it as a global endeavor, especially where we started this conversation that half of us globally are expected to have cancer in our lifetime. This isn't a South African problem, an American problem, a UK problem, and it's all of our problem. And together we have to come up with the solution. So I appreciate that. And I would welcome any follow-up meetings, conversations around this.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And thank you, Georgina, for that question. The next question from Irma. I am getting treated for metastatic breast cancer with Zobone, fulvestrant, and Duralep. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing these medications correctly. Which of these are causing my kidneys to suffer? Or I'm not sure if she's asking which one, or if they are causing a kidneys to suffer. Elevated creatinine and low eGFR.
Yeah. Well, again, without knowing all the context, without seeing her labs, the medical history, the single nucleotide polymorphisms, which should point to the pharmacogenomics, the level of hydration and nourishment, other possible barriers to kidney function beyond these pharmaceuticals. Was this person worked up for their kidney function prior to the initiation of these medications? Was there always a low level problem with the kidneys? Is there issues with diabetes or other comorbidities that create vulnerability on the kidneys, like heart disease, diabetes, all of those things? So again, I answer your question by asking more because it's going to be very, very specific to you, the individual, to understand the why, so that we can best understand the what, so we can best create the how to change this up. And so again, going on to our MTIH.org directory, we have a list of clinicians who've been trained through the metabolic approach to cancer, but also this applies to all chronic illness, as well as our advocates that can help you start to evaluate what's going on with your kidneys, which then helps us know what is the best road forward to support them. Because any one of those medications you described could have an impact there. The cocktail itself might be the problem. Maybe you need to look at a dose reduction. The conversation needs to happen with your medical team to say, this is clearly not working. How good is this for me to maybe kill the cancer if I kill myself and my kidneys along the way? It's not good. So definitely I want this person who asked this question to feel empowered to go back to the team and demand answers, to say, let's dig together. Let's find out why. So yeah, great question, but there's a lot more questions to be asked first to get an answer.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Irma, for that question. The next one is from Henry. What are some of the biggest challenges facing cancer care in our current approach? I.e., what are the things preventing medical care to switch to this integrative care approach?
Sure. Great question. Well, first of all, the cancer care industry itself is crumbling under the weight of the cost to do business. The overhead of billing, the overhead of the costs to study and produce and market these drugs. When now the drugs that we're pushing our patients to get on can be upwards of $1 million a year or more in drugs to treat, especially the new IPS and ABs, which are the new immune therapies, the new targeted therapies, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, these sort of targeted drugs, very, very expensive. So the cost is also crushing our medical system. And just to give this listener context, there was a study done a couple years ago that showed that of the 96 drugs that have come to market in the cancer space over the past 17 years, the overall survival rate, the complete across the board overall survival rate that these drugs have brought us is 2.4 months. Let that sink in. The billions of dollars we have invested into researching and bringing these drugs to market, the best we can do is to increase your lifespan by 2.4 months. That's effing not acceptable. And so that is one part of the problem, is that we keep seeking the perfect treatment and target. That doesn't exist. There is no one target. There is no one treatment. And we keep going down that path, and that path is a massive failure, period. Then the other side of it is the approach I'm talking about requires time, requires one-on-one. And when a doctor is given an average of 7 minutes to be with their patients, the care I'm talking about doesn't fit in that model. We need an entirely new model in medicine. We need to stop paying for services, and we need to start paying for time and education. If our doctors got paid to be with their patients, our healthcare costs would go down exponentially. But instead, they only get paid for procedures and prescriptions. And that is no way to both treat and prevent any illness, much less cancer. So we're not interested in fixing the broken system, because I spent the first 20 years of my career trying to do just that. Instead, we're building a new one. And I hope that whoever's listening here is compelled to help us do that.
Definitely. I know I'm feeling quite inspired by you so far, so thank you. We have another question from Henry, and he's saying, I have recently read about Joe Dispenza's work with meditation. There are some claims that they were able to reverse the growth of certain cancers. Would you happen to have any thoughts on this? Almost sounds too good to be true.
Well, I love it, but Dr. Joe is actually doing research in this. He has got the funding to do the research. And as a clinician who's had dozens and dozens of patients who have done everything, right? Everything. And I've been on the journey with them. And to see them take off for a full week immersion with Dr. Dispenza and come back and have their scans improve or even completely clear, their labs improve, their quality of life improve, who am I to negate their experience? Even if it's difficult or even impossible to explain or seems too good to be true. I've seen it enough that makes me curious enough to say, why the heck not? Bring it. And so to me, that is what keeps me humble as a clinician, is the things that maybe work for me won't work for somebody else. The things that work for somebody else maybe won't work, for me. We have to keep exploring because of our N of one, our own personal experience. And I think that Dr. Joe's work, we know through folks like Candace Pert, folks like Bruce Lipton, that we can study the impact of our thought and our beliefs on the expression of our cytokines, the expression of our immune function, our inflammatory processes. We know the concept. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. Dr. Robert Ader is who coined that term back in the 60s, 70s. This has been around for a long time, and the studies continue to build on this. This isn't a new concept. And so wouldn't it be amazing if we actually invested in people to be able to go and have these experiences, to reshape their thinking, to reshape their understanding of themselves and their relationship to themselves and others? That would probably make a heck of a lot more sense than having people, do run for life relays and keep giving monies to the same broken, antiquated systems that are not changing our outcomes one iota.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you. And thank you for that question.
Yeah.
We have one more question here, and it's just from Gemma, and she's just asking, many people say that sugar causes cancer. Is this true?
Oh, nice, sweet, short and sweet. So it's not that it necessarily causes cancer, although I will tell you that even just if you went and had a apple juice right now or a soda, you've turned off your natural killer cells for at least 7 hours. So the accumulation of ongoing overzealous amounts of sugar dismantles your body's ability to be resilient towards any disease. Okay, so it sets a state of vulnerability, and we eat far more carbohydrates and processed sugars than ever before. In the cancer world specifically, our normal cells can function beautifully. They can move in and out of dual engines of burning fats or burning sugars. Our cancer cells are really mostly only able to burn sugars. Sometimes can switch over to proteins, but that is still going into a sugar. It's gluconeogenesis, so proteins being converted into this realm. And extremely rarely, though mostly in cell line and animal studies, that there's a possibility with very late stage bulky cancers that they could even start to use fatty acid synthesis, which is a breakdown of the membranes of the body versus something you're feeding it, exogenously, that can be an issue. We've known the sugar's been a problem for a very long time. The very way in which we look for cancer is by using a glucose uptake process. So we have the patient take an intravenous application of radioactive glucose, and then we scan them to see where the cancer is active because the glucose gets positively taken up, hyper taken up by the cancer cells. The fact that we're still having this freaking conversation all these years later drives me crazy. This is no disrespect to the person asking it, but the fact that conventional medicine is still refuting it or ignoring it, that is malpractice. That is plain ignorance, and that is cognitive dissonance at its best. So absolutely, and the fact that when we carb restrict, when we put people in therapeutic ketosis, when we put people in exogenous ketones, when we put people on fasting mimicking diets, when we fast people, various roads to creating ketone bodies in the system, we make cancer cells very vulnerable to whatever treatment we want to give them. We also change many of the chemical messengers in the body, and we improve upon a lot of the anti-growth factors to help keep cancer at bay. And we strengthen the healthy cells to be more resilient to to prevention of cancer. So yes, sugar intake matters. And my hope is that this person will continue to be a voice of education and empowerment to those asking of those questions.
Thank you for that. When we speak about sugar and doctors, and I always also think about when you take your kid to the doctor, there's that jar of lollipops, and then I always think, I'm like, it's a bit of a choking hazard. Like a big round lollipop you want to give a child, they're going to get in the back of a car seat now, and I don't know, that would make me nervous.
And can
And
we
then
talk
also,
about just their mental health? What happens when a
yes,
kid gets cracked out on sugar?
exactly. And then you give them sugar. They're sick. They come to the doctor. But there you go. Here's like
Right.
a
Yeah.
basically just pure glucose. Go
Yeah, but,
enjoy.
but that's exactly what you're seeing. It doesn't just happen at the pediatric office. That's what's happening at the chemotherapy office.
Yeah.
Buckets
Yeah.
and buckets of candies and sugars and sweets and sandwiches and breads and crackers and chips and sodas and juices that they're rolling around on the cart. They are literally desensitizing your cancer cells to your treatment
Wow.
and wiping out your immune system to boot.
Sure.
It's like, this is what's so crazy. I would love to see that there's literally no food in a chemotherapy center, but the patient comes in deeply fasted. And if anything, they have electrolytes, good clean water, maybe some bone broths if they're really peckish. But beyond that, that would be a game changer for everybody. Their outcomes, as the studies have shown over and over again, they respond better to the chemo, they have less side effects, they have less drug resistance, and they recover quicker their immune system and their GI function and their weight loss when they're going into chemotherapy fasted. So yeah, I'm like you, like it drives me nuck and futz that we keep like perpetuating the problem when the solution is literally right before our very eyes.
And let's not even get into hospital food. I feel like that's
Ooh,
another
can
can
of
of,
worms.
oh my goodness. But anyway,
Absolutely.
so we have come to the end of our hour, but before we finish up, I want us, you maybe just quickly want to share a little bit about the work that you do at your nonprofit organization and the research project that you undertake.
Thank you so much. Well, with the Metabolic Institute of Health, we are a foundation that is committed to education. So we educate practitioners and allied healthcare professional advocates from around the globe. We're almost up to 639 countries. We admit 2 cohorts a year, matriculate 2 cohorts a year. Our next clinician training starts in September, and our next advocacy training starts in November. We are also dropping a do-it-yourself kind of to the layperson course later this summer, which we're very excited about. So it can also be an empowerment tool for people just like curious as to how to bring this to bear. We also have a nonprofit lab, as you mentioned. We just opened up our lab, which is moving into research and development of novel therapeutics and novel delivery systems for therapies that really enhance metabolic approaches to cancer. We also will be doing cell line studies as well as mitochondrial respiration studies and metabolomics, which is the future of metabolic oncology as well. We also have grants that we raise funds for to help patients who do not have resources access this type of care. And so that's something we're very proud of. We also have grant opportunities for clinicians and advocates who don't have the funds to actually take the education course. So we are all about accessibility. So that's what we're doing. We're also, what we're focusing on now are those items, but we also have land donated for where we'll be building the first of its kind residential integrative oncology, metabolic oncology hospital and research institute on a 1,200-acre organic regenerative farm in Southeast Arizona, 150 beds, teaching hospital with a teaching kitchen, with a culinary school on the campus, with wellness destination on the campus, with mixed use residential, green, commercial. The campus will be completely off the grid, hardwired in to give the best opportunity for patients to understand how best to nourish and nurture their body back to balance, and to teach clinicians and people from all over the world to do the same. So those are just a few things we have in the mix here, constantly growing. You can follow us on MTIH.org. Please sign up for our newsletter so you can stay abreast of what's going on. Please find us. I travel and speak all over the world. Find out where I am next. Maybe we can put together a class or something locally. I'm honored to be able to continue to spread this information far and wide. And with your help, we can do this together.
Thank you so, so much. The work you and your team have been doing is absolutely incredible, life-changing. So thank you again so much for coming here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining our live. It was lovely having you with us. Thank you for all the questions. Again, thank you, Dr. Nasha Winters, for being here with us. I hope you have a lovely day further and enjoy your stay in Ibiza. And we will definitely chat soon.
Thank you all. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.